Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Haberman, and I am making this video to share the results of a study that I conducted in October of 2024 on the correlations between the big five aspects of personality and Holland's codes of career interest. So if you've received this link directly from me, I reached out to you at some point over the summer, the fall, to participate in this study, and or I might have asked you to distribute the questionnaire to friends, family, or colleague members. I am following up with this series of videos. This is the last video, as my way of saying thank you to the people that participated in that study. The agenda for the video series, this video is talking about the discussion, and as you can see, it is the last video in the series. Um, the a dissertation is a very lengthy process, and the defense of that dissertation is usually scheduled to last around 45 minutes. And so I understand that 45 minutes is very difficult to find an uninterrupted chunk. So I broke up each section into a separate video within a single playlist for your convenience. As I said, this is the last video of that series. So if you did miss the first four videos, feel free to go back and look at that information. I am going to go into a little bit more depth on this video, so I'm going to try to talk fast and stick to my script and get through this as quickly as possible because it's a lot of information, and I want to try to be as respectful of your time as possible. So a couple of things that are going to kind of be in each of the findings that I present. I am going to intentionally talk about the big five personalities just because they are relatively easy to identify in ourselves and other people. And so this is helpful for people that are, teachers that are working with students, or it is also helpful for employers that are working with employees. So we can kind of pick up on people's personalities if we're in those types of leadership type roles like teachers, employers, administrators. Another thing is I am going to give some employer tips. Employers should keep these ideas in the back of their mind when hiring. So, for example, if a job requires a certain type of work and their personality doesn't quite match that job skill, they might require additional training. And so you as an employer would need to know if your company has the willingness and or available resources to train somebody in that skill. And then finally, most of my examples are classroom examples. This study was conducted to provide information to teachers who are in guidance counseling roles. And so I have examples throughout this video for those teachers. So digging right in, we're going to go into extroversion. It's one of the easier traits to start with, so I'm glad that I get to start with it. Most of us can identify whether we are more or less extroverted, and we can also kind of gauge whether other people are more or less extroverted. And extroverted people tend to be more the go-getters, or they're really bubbly, while reserved people tend to be more modest in their approach to life. And I very intentionally am not using the term introversion just because in the study that I conducted, that is not the scale that they use. And so I know a lot of people are more comfortable with the term introversion. I just don't use that term. So as you can see on the left, extroverted people tend to be more satisfied with their job. That's the smiley face that you see. And they tend to prefer jobs where they're helping or leading people. So just lots of working with people. On the other hand, reserved people tend to feel less of that job satisfaction. And then specifically submissive people within the reserved category, they like jobs where they are organizing things. And so you can see that over on the back end to the extroverted people, there's a little star by social and enterprising careers. That just means that so extroverted people tend to work and are interested in both social and enterprising jobs. So if I were in a classroom, I'm going to give a hypothetical scenario. If I were in a classroom and I noticed that a student was particularly driven or really chipper, I might suggest that they were would be good at teaching or social work or management or sales, any of those types of helping or leading jobs. Um, but I would also reach out to the more submissive students, and or even the reserved students just in general, and ask if they have ever considered working in more of those conventional careers like bookkeeping or accounting or finance. But then I would leave it at that and just give them time to consider that. Um, so, with an extroverted student, being suggested an idea is not necessarily a huge deal, but for a more reserved student, getting those suggestions might come as a little bit of a shock. So just giving the option for them to consider that uh, type of job. And even mentioning like, hey, I think you might be good at that. And next, openness to experience. So open people are really easy to spot because they generally express themselves very creatively. So some examples, they might be the kind of person that doodles or draws while they're working on something. They might also have tattoos or brightly colored hair or very expressive clothing, unique clothing. So the less imaginative people tend to wear more traditional hairstyles and attire. On the other hand, the intellectual person, they are not necessarily always apparent until they start talking. And so, if you have somebody who's reserved and intellectual, you might not actually hear them say things like that. But they are going to have, when they start talking, it's a very in-depth conversation on whatever's on their mind. So it could be the politics of North Korea to, you know, mining in South America to, I'm thinking of examples of student conversations that I've had, or, how robots work or ghost adventures. So they have very in-depth conversations of whatever it is on their mind. So while the less intellectual person is perfectly content with small talk. So that's how you would kind of tell those people apart. So those more open, kind of creative type of people, they definitely prefer the jobs where they're creating new things or helping people. That might sound a little off, but if you think about it, there's tons of different people out in this world, and an open person kind of wants to meet all of them and just get to know all of those different people. So that does make sense from that perspective. As far as our intellectual people, they are very into problem solving. They honestly are probably connected with science teachers. They really like the science side of learning. If I were in a classroom and I noticed these students, so if it was open or intellectual, I would ask them if they have ever considered one of these types of careers. So maybe an architectural program or educational or even IT. And I would just leave it at that because just the suggestion, the nice thing about working with open and intellectual students is that once the idea is in their head, they will just run with it and they will begin exploring the possibilities immediately. The intellectual person might even kind of think about how that would potentially work. Um, so, whether or not they would act on something like that, that is dependent on their other aspects of their personality. But I very much like the idea of just putting a bug in their ear and then leaving it at that. I might potentially ask for both open and intellectual students what colleges they have considered, because those students would just enjoy the collegiate experience. Over on the right, these are in italics because they are potential jobs. I did not find any correlations to any of the careers with the more unimaginative people. So this would just be something that we would rely on other aspects of their personality to offer a suggestion, possibly something that's in line with their family or friends or community members, what other people are suggesting. And then I also very much picked jobs that were kind of the opposite of social and artistic careers. So more of those conventional like bookkeeping and accounting jobs, and those hands-on type work. So they're just possibilities. But personally, I would rely on other aspects of their personality for this suggestion. Conscientious people they're really hardworking but efficient people. So they're the kind of people that we ask, I don't know how they get it all done. Those are your conscientious people. On the other hand, the erratic people are known for their spontaneity. And I guess if I were to give an opposite quote, I'd say, I don't know how that even happens to them. So that would be conscientious versus erratic. So our orderly people, they love jobs that are organizing. Obviously, that makes a lot of sense. Well, the chaotic people, they really love finding beauty in chaos. And then that is what allows them to create those beautiful works of art that we get to appreciate. If I noticed these two students in a classroom, so the organized person, I would definitely suggest something in bookkeeping or accounting, something that uses their organizational skills. On the other hand, my more erratic or chaotic students, I might make the suggestion that they check out the theater, our theater classes or programs if we have them in our school, or dance, or something that that would allow them to kind of focus those artistic abilities and learn some of those more conscientious traits through theater or dance or whatever creative outlets they might have. As far as the more conscientious students, I would also make the suggestion to consider college or starting a business because those require a lot of discipline. And those students wouldn't need that motivational type of support to do those things. They would be able to do that kind of on their own, whereas other students might need additional support. On the other hand, if I had a student who really wanted to go to college, but they maybe lacked that discipline, I might actually consider the military, which gives a very thorough introduction to how to be disciplined in one's life. As far as agreeableness, let me find my mouse here. So agreeable is very easy. It's kind of in its name. They're agreeable people, but they're the go along, get alongs in this world. So it makes sense that they want to help other people. So they really like those social jobs. Specifically, you can see here that compassionate people tend to work and are interested in the more social jobs. So I guess the way you can think of it is if you've got a lot of go along, get alongs in your classroom, they're probably going to end up in a social job either way because that's what they like to do and they're just gravitating towards something that they're good at. On the other hand, the more cantankerous people, they tend to like jobs where they're working with their hands rather than having to work with other people. And really, really kind of confrontational people, they tend to work, they tend to enjoy the jobs where they're organizing things. So if you think of something like an assembly line worker where it's kind of that structured and predictable environment, they really kind of like those types of organizational jobs. And I think schools are very good at recognizing the go along, get alongs and making suggestions that they'd be good teachers or social workers. And the students know that about themselves. And like I said, they end up in those types of jobs pretty easily. As far as if I were to notice a student that was a little bit cantankerous, I might ask if I might offer suggestion or classroom activities that are hands-on. And that's easy as a science teacher. It's not so easy in other subjects, but I would have those hands-on activities. And then while they're working on those, I might make the suggestion or ask if they have ever considered working as a mechanic or a carpenter and just leave it as a suggestion. Especially because of their disagreeable nature, I wouldn't want to openly make a suggestion that they can say no to. I would just ask if they've considered it and then give them time to actually consider it. Our final personality trait is neuroticism. And these are honestly the easiest students to miss in a classroom. This is a personality trait of how we perceive our emotions. And so if you've ever heard the phrase, it's all in your head, that is a very, very accurate description of how neurotic people approach the world. Um, and so on the opposite side of that, people who score lower in neuroticism, they're less likely to get riled up and they have more confidence in themselves, whereas the neurotic people are a little bit more sensitive. So the more sensitive people are drawn to artistic careers, which makes sense because the arts require a lot of expressive emotion. Whereas the less sensitive people, they're drawn to careers where being overly sensitive isn't helpful. So, for example, in the scientific types of careers or social careers. If I noticed students who exhibited neurotic tendencies, so ways that I might notice that is if they're a little bit quieter, or they're missing school, or something like that, or honestly, if they have an IEP that says that they have those types of um, sensitivities, I would start by actually having some creative assignments where they might have some artistic ways of showing their knowledge of the material. And then as a way to build confidence, I'd offer praise when things are good, and just appreciate how they are doing on their art. But then over time, I might ask if they've considered a career in the arts. Again, waiting, giving them time to consider and keeping things nice and slow for them. As far as the more composed students, honestly, I would base my suggestions on other personality traits. I know that my study absolutely found that they did better in those types of careers, but I would just base it off of their overall personality. And I do talk about that in my summary. And then finally, you can see there's the smiley face by the composed people. They're more satisfied with their jobs. So my next slide is just kind of a summary of everything. A lot of the suggestions that I have made are related to the classroom. However, and I also did this like kind of on a daily basis as they came up, as I was working with my students and catching those things. Those are the types of things I would address as I went. These are also things that parents could do at home. So as you're interacting with your children, you can do this, but also employers making observations of their employees and interacting with their employees. These are things that also could be modified. It's a little different in the workforce. So I very much personally preferred having the interactions, the opportunity to individually connect with my students on kind of an as you go basis, or as other issues came up, if something happened and we needed to talk about it, rather than addressing it in our formal advisory period. So I like to take care of things as they come up rather than waiting. As I mentioned a couple of times, I base these suggestions on, sometimes I have to base these suggestions on other personality traits. So it's some students, they know exactly what they want to do when they are 5. Others are still figuring it out at 55. So it's really important for teachers, parents, employers to take a step back whenever they're giving any type of career advice and just look at the whole person, and kind of take a breath first before having those conversations about careers. I did mention a couple of personality traits that don't like to rush into having those conversations, and so that this is a really good helpful tip for people that are offering advice to people. Finally, I personally saw the benefits of using both the Big Five aspect scale and Hollings codes in my regular classes. I think I used them for about 6 or so years. So I personally saw the benefit in those, and I use them early in the school year. I very much like to get the idea of what types of students might be interested in, and then I plan my classroom around that, my activities. But then it's also helpful to find out how to support my students kind of using that personality side and just knowing that some people like time to consider and some people want the information right away. Um, my mouse isn't showing up on here, so I'm sorry if there it is. As far as future research, this is just something that is discussed in dissertations. So just from the data that I collected in this study, I would be able to dig into other factors that influence personality and or career interest. So some examples from my lit review from 3 videos ago would be age, childhood environment, the type and or level of education that the participant had, and their income. And so that is something that I would very much like to look into as I go forward and continue to participate in academic research. Also, I mentioned that I could not find any relationships of career fit. I mentioned this in my results, so the 4th video. So because I ended up using a novel approach. So I would kind of like to go back and look at the data and look at other measures of career fit as a potential way to see if there was um, just a better way to determine if there is a career fit or not. And then finally, I wasn't planning on it, but I did find some geographic differences in personality. And so I do know that this is currently being researched by a person named Peter Renfro at the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom. And so the data that was collected in this study could be used in collaboration with him, or a new study could also be looked at. And we are at the end. So thank you so much again to all of the people that have been watching these videos and who participated in my research. If you have any questions or comments, I very much love to talk about my research, obviously. But if you got this through an email, just let me know and I will respond back to the email. If you got this from somebody else, please comment below. I'll keep an eye on that until the end of June. And again, thank you so much.